Star Wars The Force Awakens is finally here and has been met with joyful praise throughout the galaxy, and while the 7th installment of the franchise is starting a trilogy of its own, there will of course always be callbacks, Easter eggs, and references to past films. So while I'm hoping you made it to your screening without getting spoiled, it's time for the after credits part as we dissect all the cool things there are to notice, from the intro scroll to seeing X-Wings and TIE Fighters again, and the return of some of the most iconic characters in all of cinema. So without further ado, let's start it off with an Easter egg that can be heard all throughout the Star Wars films, and that is of course the Wilhelm scream. You know, that cartoony soundbite when someone falls or gets hurt. Well, they didn't stray away from it here and can be heard early on when Poe and Finn escape on a TIE Fighter. And even though everyone knows what you get when you wipe, Abram embraces those transitions from the originals and uses them in the best way possible. So props to you, JJ, props to you. Some of the other cool things to notice dealing with outside Easter eggs is the fact that 007 actually makes a cameo in this movie, and where Daniel Craig is playing the stormtrooper that Rey manipulates into unlocking her and dropping his gun as he walks away. Simon Pegg, who we know was on set several times and let everyone know, is actually the fat scrap metal alien who is always scamming Rey out of what she deserves. As for the lovable BB-8, you can thank Bill Hader and Ben Schwartz, who are the guys behind the voice of this droid. Yeah, that's right, Flint Lockwood and John Ralphio. Who would have figured? There's also a personal J.J. Abrams Easter egg that alludes to his grandfather Harry Kelvin, who, if you've seen many of his productions, you would know that ever since Fringe, he's had Kelvin genetics. In Lost, there was a man named Kelvin Joe Inman. In Mission Impossible 3, there was a postcard made out to an H. Kelvin. Kirk was born aboard the USS Kelvin. Super 8 had a gas station named the Kelvin gas station. And of course here we have Rey, who tells BB-8 the direction of the Kelvin Ridge. Getting into some of the references of the originals, people will be happy to hear quotes such as, "I've got a bad feeling about this," said once again by Han Solo, who also takes the time to correct Rey on the Kessel Run the Millennium Falcon did, which was under 12 parsecs and not 14. There have been many people who want to call The Force Awakens A New Hope 2.0, and you know that isn't completely wrong, but that doesn't mean that this formula isn't bad to use again, because it gets the job done. I mean, just like Leia puts the plans in R2-D2, we see in this movie that Poe puts the map in BB-8, who then becomes the MacGuffin they're looking for throughout the film. The Millennium Falcon, when we first see it in this movie, is referenced as a piece of junk, just like it wasn't considered the best in the originals, but once we enter it, we see a lot more callbacks, such as Chewie's holographic chess table, which gets bumped into, Finn looking through a box of junk and pulling out a remote that looks very similar to what Obi-Wan used to teach Luke, and a gong droid, which is pretty much just a battery that appears a couple of times throughout the film. When Han and the gang have taken Captain Phasma captive, Finn asks what they should do with her. Han suggests tossing her down a trash chute, which is something that he went through a while back. Of course, with this being a start-off point for a new trilogy, it does create new worlds that still maintain glimpses of the past. For example, we have the planet Jakku, which is new, but is very desert-like just like Tatooine, but with a little bit more green. Takodana is very forest-like just like Endor, but with less adorable Ewoks, and Hosnian Prime is a blizzard-like planet just like Hoth. There's even a new cantina in Takodana run by Maz Kanata, who's like a non-Jedi Yoda who can look into your eyes and see your soul. This cantina of course has its own jizz music, which I'm not kidding. In Star Wars canon, that jazz music is actually called jizz music. Maz also has her own treasury down below full of artifacts that I'm sure we'll see Easter eggs coming up from, and I guess some that aren't really that important considering that she doesn't take care of it and lock it. I mean, anyone can go in there and take things such as, I don't know, Luke's lightsaber. We also see on the outside of her cantina several flags, one which references Boba Fett's Mandalorian flag, just hanging there among the rest of them. Wrapping up this portions of references though, we see Nien Nunb, Admiral Akbar, I know it's not a trap this time, still fighting against the dark side, all culminating in destroying an even bigger version of a Death Star in the Starkiller base and making a similar grand escape with the explosion in the back. So yeah, A New Hope 2.0 is kind of the right way to name this movie. But now let's get into two of the most pivotal new characters in Episode 7 with Rey and Kylo Ren. Starting off with Kylo, we see that Kylo is to Snoke what Vader was to Palpatine, making Supreme Leader Snoke pretty much Emperor 2.0. And while Snoke is being played by the incredible Andy Serkis, who has played King Kong before, I don't think Snoke's going to end up being that 40-foot tall hologram that we see in this movie. We do see though that Snoke also gives his Knights of Ren new names, such as Kylo, but in this case, Kylo's real name is Ben Solo, like Ben Kenobi, aka Obi-Wan. We then get the big reveal in this movie that Kylo Ren is in fact the son of Leia and Han. Han, whose death is set in a very similar Empire Strikes Back setting, and just continuing the crazy family relationships in the Star Wars universe. You know, you can pretty much make a Keeping Up with the Skywalkers series. And while some have already complained about how Adam Driver doesn't look as menacing as when he has the mask on as Kylo Ren, it's still interesting to see how angsty he is, just like his uncle and grandfather were, especially when he takes off the mask, and where he may be a bit more determined on the evil side than Luke was, but at least he's way less brooding than Anakin was. On top of it, the father story here may be the most complex yet, with Ben Solo not having a stable father in Han, obviously, thus moving on to his closest father figure in his uncle Luke, who he then loses faith in and then creates a fictional apprenticeship with the ghost of Vader, who I guess he doesn't know found redemption in the end. We see two other instances where he mimics his predecessor, who he keeps his melted mask of, in the way he tortures Poe and Rey, very similar to how Han Solo was tortured as well. He even ends with a scar over his face, very reminiscent of the scar that Anakin had in Revenge of the Sith. But now we move on to Rey, one of the best characters of this movie, and one who lives in a broken down AT-AT, and seems to even be wearing Luke's rebel helmet early on in the film. Of course, the connections between her and Luke don't stop there, and where she has a very similar scene from Empire Strikes Back, in where Luke in the Wampa Cave calls for the lightsaber. She does the same thing here, in where she calls for the lightsaber and it goes to her instead of Kylo Ren. The film even ends with her and Luke on an island, which may also be Hamill's easiest paycheck, and leaving off in what may be a Yoda-like training period between the two, or more so father-daughter time. We'll just have to wait to get that confirmed. Overall though, those were the Easter eggs I was able to find. Definitely let me know your thoughts and what Easter eggs you were able to find and that I may have missed, and what you thought about the movie overall. Worth the hype? Worth the wait? And well, we have a couple more years till episode 8 and as we see everything continue on. Definitely let me know your thoughts about the film and anything else dealing with episode 7 down below in the comments section. And until next time, may the Force be with you always, and I'll see you guys later.